All right. Well, welcome to Homeschool Conversations. I am Rebecca Good, and I have the lovely Angela Humphries with North Carolina School Choice and Rachel Terry with School Choice Nebraska back today. So we have a lot to talk about today, and I'm not sure when this will be released because, as most of you know, I'm going to be having a baby any day. So I'll be releasing these during my maternity time. So be thinking about me. But yesterday, so we got a couple things to talk about. Yesterday, there was a homeschool debate with the Cato Institute hosted with Carrie McDonald and Neil McCluskey, and they were talking with Elizabeth Bartholet and Milton Gaither about homeschool, the presumptive ban that Elizabeth Bartholet has talked about with homeschool. So I wanted to talk about that, get some reaction from Angela and Rachel. And then, if we have time, I also want to talk about post COVID-19 school policy changes. And today is June the 16th. So I know maybe possibly by the time this comes out, some states will release more information because I know there's just still a lot of surveys and back and forth going on about those talks of what is school going to look like in the fall. I am in Virginia, so I do have some information that I've read about what our governor is asking. Each school district will be able to come up with how they want to implement these changes, but there are some things coming from the governor's office already. So I will kind of share that, and then we'll hear about what's going on in North Carolina and Nebraska, and just also what are parents saying, because I've been reading comments and things online of what people are saying. So we'll kind of mix everything up. But as far as the reaction to the homeschool debate, I have a couple of things definitely that really stuck out to me about it. But Angela, Rachel, either of you, what were some of the main things that you felt maybe weren't addressed fully enough, or was there some parts that you felt were not presented accurately? What was your reaction?
Ooh, pick me, pick me.
Okay.
Icebreaker. My daughter wanted me to mention that she does not want the government coming to visit our homeschool, as was suggested in that broadcast. So she was like, please tell your homeschool friends today that I don't want the government coming.
Well, and that was really one of my biggest takeaways was I felt like they kept saying homeschool is unregulated. And I thought, again, each state has its own ability to regulate it. So if the state doesn't ask for that notice of intent, if the state's not asking for, assessments, that's not our fault. If they're not tracking homeschoolers, again, that's just up to the particular state. But I feel that I think it's only, I thought it was only like maybe 5 or 10 states that don't collect information. So I'm thinking that's a large majority that who do.
Right.
And again, they each state has some slight differences. Um, and that was again part of the debate was what should the regulations be. So do you have any thoughts on what do you feel like there should be some type of minimum regulation, and if so, what would that look like?
You want to take it, Rachel?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure I do think there should be some minimum type of regulation because I don't necessarily think that that the government should be required to do anything about kids' educations. That this is a family parent issue. And one of my big takeaways from this conversation was I feel like, I doubt there's anybody who thinks that child abuse is not a problem anywhere in our society, right? Like child abuse is horrendous, and we all want to help children who are in those kinds of situations. But the way that Bartholet was framing this just came across to me as a bit disingenuous. And I'm not saying that she's insincere. I get the feeling that she's very sincere in her beliefs and that she genuinely cares about children. And that probably she just is quite unfamiliar with our point of view as far as, parents are the ones who should make the decisions for their children. But about 5 years ago, when one of my kids was in public middle school, there was a teacher who was arrested for sexually assaulting one of the students. And my daughter had been sitting in class with this teacher. And of course, many parents were very upset. And I happened to be running for school board at the time. And so the newspaper was interviewing me about this. And I said, I think there should probably be some kind of investigation just to find out what's going on with the hiring practices, because this was a brand new teacher who on the very first day in this position started texting one of the 8th graders in a way that led to a sexual assault. And so, as a mother with a daughter in this class, I thought, I want to find out what's going on with hiring, that this happened, the first day of school with this new teacher. And the response from the school district and from the school board was to downplay this obvious abuse that this guy went to jail for. They referred to this as a mistake instead of a crime, things like that. And so if I were seeing the same kind of concern for child abuse going on in the government schools, I think I would take this line of reasoning more seriously with as far as homeschool, but I don't see the same concern. Of course, I'm concerned about child abuse anywhere it happens, but from some people, I'm only seeing concern about child abuse that happens in a homeschool situation at the same time that child abuse in the government schools is downplayed and minimized. And, as a mother back in that situation 5 years ago, I felt that I was under attack for asking questions about child abuse that was in the newspapers happening at the school. This wasn't just a suspicion. The guy was in handcuffs, And so I just have a hard time taking it seriously. We're afraid of child abuse in homeschool when I don't see that same concern for obvious things that happen in the government schools.
Yeah, I can weigh in on that. I had a situation where my child was supposedly on the same track and potentially in the same classroom as someone who sounds very similar to your story, Rachel, where a notice went home where they said, how they put out robocall communications where they so they can communicate with you in more than one form. So whether it's in writing and a letter is going home in a folder, hopefully you get it. And then you have that weekly robocall. And then they also have the capability to notify you at any point in time. Like if something comes up, hey, we're on lockdown today, those calls come in too. So a note came home, the robocall came, then another robocall to contradict the previous robocall. So you can imagine my reaction, but it's very similar. It sounds very similar to yours. And then when you follow that case in the media, it was hard to prosecute someone like that because you're really relying on, this was an elementary school. So you're relying on, in this case, I think it was a kindergartner to be brave enough to testify against someone who had violated her. So that's almost an impossible case. So I don't think he was charged at first, and then they found something else later. But following up with the school was important. And so when I make a mental list of why I left, it wasn't just because, I got tired of my kid getting lice one year in a charter school. The government-run school, we tolerated a lot too, like getting hit in the face and how the school reacted. This sexual abuse situation where my child wasn't impacted, but the way the news handled it, the way the courts handled it, The way the school system handled it and HR handled it was just, like, why are you asking questions? Go away.
Yeah.
So that is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
I know. And in the debate, you could kind of see it with Professor Bartholet, like when she was responding to a question, instead of using the word abuse to talk about these things that happen in government schools, she would say bullying and other things.
Yeah.
And so, probably we all do this to some extent, but she, even in that conversation, was minimizing what happened in public schools while generalizing to a larger extent what, unfortunately does sometimes happen in homeschool.
Yeah, and I thought Carrie McDonald did a great job, and she brought the statistics, and she said, 10% of kids will be, sexually either harassed or violated by an employee, and then when she said, and I had never heard this before, but I believe it, that 50% of kids report being bullied at least once a month in public schools, and to me that is. That's an epidemic in itself, but yet here we are talking about these isolated, horrific, but isolated, cases of abuse in homeschool. So yeah, I did feel like that. And, they kind of, played well, we know public schools aren't perfect, but
right.
kind of thing. And I was like, hey, wait a second. Like we're sort of ignoring, this really, really big issue, but